Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most triumvirate work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are here to talk about Pale, the little old story. You may have heard of it. Before that, though, as a quick reminder, we are running a fan art contest for everybody, not just patrons. Any old person can make some art of monsters. So if you have art revolving around monsters, whether that's literal monsters like
Marisica,
yep, or figurative monsters like
Avery.
Avery.
That's right, you heard it here first.
Ooh, hot scoop. Yeah, it's been a wild few chapters, so let's talk about them. The chapters we'll be talking about are Out on a Limb 3.4 and Out on a Limb 3.5, plus gifts received, and we'll be talking about some predictions from Pale Predictor. Let's start, though, with Out on a Limb 3.4, which is from the perspective of Lucy. Yay, Lucy. And it starts with people extending an invite to Lucy, literally, to go to a cool party while they're in bio class.
Yeah. And so before we sort of dig into that, because that's absolutely worth talking about as well, something that sort of comes up in Lucy's opening thoughts on the chapter that really jumped out to me was how Lucy outlines like where everyone's sitting in this class, because they have assigned seating. And I don't know if this always jumps out to me, because at least when I went to school, like we didn't have any assigned seating. You just went into the room and sat wherever the hell you wanted. So like as an idea, it's always fascinated me, and in particular, it's sort of brought up that in this class, Mr. Lai seats them in rows, just like alphabetically. There's sort of this complete disregard for social factors or anything. Like it's just,
I like it.
Exactly. It's kind of like, because I think the only thing that ever happened at my school was if like, particular groups of kids were disruptive together.
Yeah, they'd be
you'd split them up. Yeah, exactly. Whereas this is just kind of like, I really don't give a shit about what your social situation is. Just sit next to the people who come alphabetically next to you. Probably makes marking the role a lot easier as well. But yeah, I mean, it obviously it's a really fun way for the story to kind of throw Lucy in the deep end a bit, because the Kenneteers have a bit of a habit of just sticking together or being by themselves.
Yes.
And this is just a fun way to sort of be like, no, Lucy, you have to sit next to other people and talk to them for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. One of the moments, it's weird because it really kind of gives us an opportunity to see how Lucy interacts with kids more, because we obviously saw the class ranker stuff, but we didn't really see her interact with people much. We saw a bit of it with Melissa in our last episode, but we have these weird moments in this chapter where Lucy really just feels like, I guess, more mature than her classmates is really the only way to put it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and then she gets a "Why don't you smile more?" dropped on her, and I was just like, "Oh, that's the worst."
How do people who say specifically that not realize that they're like a walking stereotype?
Thing. I know, it's the most nonsensical thing to say. Anyway, yeah, good times in high school.
Yeah, I think So, but like the sort of wider thing about this is like Lucy, thinks about this a lot as it's happening, and she's kind of considering the whole sort of angle of what Booker said. Like she's taking what I would describe as a very pragmatic approach to how she thinks about going to this party. Like she compares it to how she sort of is bulletproofing herself with her morning routine. And she's sort of like, okay, well, if I go to this and kind of invest time in being around them in a social setting, they'll feel obligated not to be shitty to me. So, but like, there's no moment where she's like, oh, this might be fun. She's sort of like, oh, this will probably be babysitting or whatever. But there's sort of like, it's this very analytical kind of, I will go to the party to, get social points.
Yeah,
That means that they can't be mean to me, which is I guess like it a good sign or whatever. But there's some bits here where she interacts with Alexa.
Yeah,
sorry,
it's a reason to do it,
Yeah, well, I'm glad, because I hope it will be sort of the start of like she'll go there and end up having fun.
Yeah, So something else that happens in this part is we get a bit more of Verona and Jeremy, is that his name?
Yeah.
Hanging out, and Verona's still like, ugh, can't I don't even know why I'm talking to him. You know, it reminds me of what's happening here with Lucy, where it's like you want them to be pushed a little bit to be get out of their shell in terms of socializing with people who aren't just literally Verona and Lucy, right? And
Yeah,
Avery's
exactly.
had that to an extent, but it feels much more necessary for Lucy and Verona to actually have good interactions with people their own age that aren't the trio.
Yeah, because in a kind of weird way, them having had each other allows them an outlet aside from like going to other people. You know what I mean? Like Avery sort of sunk, and she had to be brought back up to the surface, and that involved meeting new people, and like
Mm.
especially in this case, these two. Lucy and Verona can always kind of fall back on each other.
Yeah, and
Um,
not just that, but the fact that they both see like regular interaction with people their own age as a waste of their time means that they're
yeah,
kind of caught in this echo chamber of, I mean, yes, they both do have valid reasons for that because they have
yeah,
been treated
absolutely.
shittily by people their own age, of course, but it's kind of nice to have that broken a little bit because I'm sure there are positive interactions and good people that they can interact with in canon.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I thought it was interesting reading this part where like Lucy has or the world has sort of turned Lucy into someone who e- expects good people to see past like any rough exterior she has and give her a chance. And then I was sort of thinking, oh, maybe she isn't as willing to give other people a chance.
Mm,
But then I was like, well, actually, she's known most of these people since they were in diapers, probably. Like,
mm,
and even just in this conversation here, a few of them give up like their chance.
yeah.
Mr. Smile Man in particular, I've forgotten his
Hmm.
name.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's a moment here, like Alexa has the bit where she's like, "Why are you always such a downer?" And then Lucy's just kind of like, "Well, I'm thinking sort of longer term." And then Alexa has that bit where she gets caught and she sort of has to turn around and be like, "You all right?" And then like Lucy does smile, and I just took that as like this hope of like, oh, okay, they're like this could be good somewhere. Like
Yeah.
if Lucy lets those people see that brighter side of her, like it might just be better for everyone. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. It is good. It's yeah, it's very nice.
Also, you
um
brought up the Verona and Jeremy thing. I like I just love the reaction Lucy and in particular Avery have to that. It's like everyone ships Verona and Jeremy except Verona.
yeah.
Actually, maybe not actually like not except Verona. Like
She
maybe
just
even
hasn't
Verona. She
yeah,
just
she
doesn't know
just
yet.
doesn't let herself do it yet, you know.
Yeah.
No, it's very nice. It's that part of a young relationship where it's like, they're kind of they're in this position of like talking to each other enough that they're starting to I don't know the word for it. Circle the drain of a relationship, but that sounds so negative. Whatever the positive version of that is, but Verona specifically is not yet realizing that that's what a relationship looks like when it's brand new.
Yeah, I mean, she just it's kind of like I think she wants a relationship. She just doesn't want it to be a relationship, if that
Mm,
makes sense. Like it's just that as an idea has been poisoned to her, so she kind of needs something without labels, for her
yes,
to like be
yes.
okay with it.
Yeah, it'll take her a while to feel ready to be in what she would think of as a relationship. So the longer it can
Exactly.
masquerade as something else, the better.
I mean, luckily Jeremy seems on board with that or cognizant of it or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, I think he's being I mean, we haven't seen that much of their interactions, but from what the previous interaction with the cat was, it seems like he's being pretty chill about it because he realizes that's
Yeah.
the right approach. So thumbs up, Jeremy. Um, let's talk about this ecosystems chat, shall we? Um,
Yes.
so Lucy basically starts talking to the biology teacher about how collections of others work. I mean, and she's trying to, vaguely disguise it as something biology related, but I'm a little bit. I was surprised that she thought this would be useful, I guess. But he does give some answers that at least prompt some thoughts in her, which is nice.
Yeah, like, I think every time we see bits of their schoolwork, I come in the next episode and I'm like, this will mean something. You just wait. Um,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one quite explicitly, you know, does. Like, because I think, yeah, you're right. They start to use biological modeling to kind of represent stuff that's going on here. But I think the thing is, like, what's fun here is like biological modeling. Like, you always sort of you have to simplify things because, I
Mm,
mean, well, that's what modeling is.
yes.
And it never quite works because you simplify things, and that's kind of explicitly addressed in these segments when they're like, "Wait, so is the invasive species the
Yes,
require or the
exactly.
practitioners? Oh, and is the gardener is that Miss or the
Or the
like
Carmine
there's like
Beast, like, yeah, it doesn't
you could
really track.
well, you can use these angles to analyze the same situation from sort of multiple ways, and that's sort of the thing. Like, this is a complex ecosystem, and you can use these models to try and inspect certain aspects of it from certain angles, but it doesn't give you the whole picture because that's not what it isn't doing. That's not what you're doing by definition.
Yeah. I think the only real beat that we get that kind of feels like any kind of answer, I suppose, is when Mr. Lai says, you know, actually, one of the only things I took from it was when Mr. Lai says, instead of calling it collapse, use a different word because it's not a collapse. It's just there will become a new equilibrium at some point. It just is, we'll have to see what happens in the interim, right? Um,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, because there's obviously like mixed into the general biology stuff, like Mr. Lai sort of pivots into these garden metaphors, which I think
yes.
I remember reading in one of his blog posts or something that Wildbow used to be a gardener. So it makes sense to me that like this would be a metaphor that just came through as so clear to me because
Sure.
like Wildbow's probably pulling from his past.
Yep.
Um, but I love this idea of Mr. Lai talking about how the gardens we create normally they require so much effort because they are artificial.
Mm.
And like in my mind, I was like at one point applying that to what Miss has done here in town, but then I was like, oh, or do you also say that that's what normal like practitionery stuff is, and Miss is trying to
Mm.
create something more self-sustaining? Like, was that what
Mm.
she was trying to do? Like, it's what I love about
Yeah.
these things is I was like trying to look at all different aspects of this story and world through these lenses, and I could
Interesting.
come up with things for all of them. It's
Yeah,
fun.
there's I think yeah, maybe there's something in here that will seem like it applies quite strongly in retrospect, but at this point it's too vague of a way to apply this metaphor for us to really be like, and this is what we're saying here. There's too many interpretations.
Yeah, and they all seem to have some sort of merit. And I don't
Yes.
know. I kind of feel like maybe that's the point.
Mm.
Is that a lot of these things are sort of saying, yeah, these are complex, not contained ecosystems. Stuff's going to come in and out. It's always going to be kind of uncontrollable. And I
Yeah.
suppose the one thing that comes out of it is Mr. Lie's sort of like what you need to do is figure out a way to either have a gardener or have like a self-sustaining ecosystem. And what we don't know at the moment is okay, well, what is that in this context? How do you create that here?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this kind of prompts some thoughts, and the trio begin to plan their next steps here. It seems like they're still thinking about the origins of the HC, and what theories might be around how it was created.
Yeah. I think what's really funny though is as they leave school and they sort of keep trying to talk about business, but the
Mm.
conversation keeps turning into like checking each other okay. Like they check on Avery and Lucy sort of are like, hey Verona, how are things with your dad? And like obviously they're not great, but she's dealing and they offer to help and she's sort of like thanks, but no. Lucy and Verona kind of check how Avery's doing. I don't think Lucy gets her moment, but that's about right for her, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, it's just like I don't know, but I still felt it was heartwarming that it's like before they actually managed to consistently stay on topic about the business, they kind of check with each other. It's like, oh, how are we doing?
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Alright.
Avery says that she just wants to go home and hug her trashy hobo child, which I don't have anything to say about that. I just wanted to say it. It's such a good line.
Relatable, very relatable. So yeah, let's touch on the theories that they kind of bring up here, right? So
Sure.
I mean, these aren't mutually exclusive, but they're all just kind of points that they think about.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
first is thinking of the hungry choir as an invasive species that's kind of been introduced to an environment that suits it, and now it is going out of control, as invasive species are wont to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's a rabbit or a cane toad
Yeah.
for us Australians.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, yeah, I guess the obviously interesting thing that they go into after this is it like rabbits and cane toads something that was introduced on purpose and has spiraled out of control.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, and
if Charles put this together from Yolda, I'm skipping ahead a bit, but
yeah,
like,
sure.
if he did that and there was like a point and then it's like, well, what if it, just went beyond what they expected?
Yeah, maybe there was an original intention that has become warped and deformed that is now what the Hungry Choir has become. Although, having said that, they do, from a few chapters ago, or 2 chapters ago, I think, we had the beat that Alexander said that the Hungry Choir hasn't actually significantly adapted since it was first, in air quotes, introduced.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
But what if it
yeah,
was? What if it was like? What if it's grown? Like, it could be that thing where it's like, oh, you introduce a species to. I mean, well, cane toads don't work because they didn't even do what they were brought here to do. It's like,
mm,
oh, like, okay, what if the situation was Yolda was making people sick or having a bad effect on the town? It was like, okay,
yeah,
we can't kill her, but what we can do is transform her into something that will spread that suffering out
right, yes.
and like sort of put it in this ritual, and then the ritual blew out and it's like, okay, so before
Oops.
yeah, maybe it's just killing more people than they expected, or something like that, and
Yeah.
maybe this goes against what you were just sort of about, like, maybe when it started it was only like every full moon or something, and it's like grown in
Mm,
power, and now the nights are more frequent and it's getting more victims. I don't know.
mm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like that. So the second one is, well, why is the Hungry Choir in Kennet was the question that they were trying to answer, and possibly the answer is Kennet shares something in common with ghost towns. Potentially that there are no practitioners here, which feels pretty good as a response to me.
Yes, or sort of the opposite was something that was brought up, which is if like Kennet is special in terms of the towns, which like if it
Yes.
was made from Yolda, or
Yeah.
if is there something specifically tying the Hungry Choir to
To
Kennet as
Kennet, or is
opposed?
it just another town like the ghost towns, but then why?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So then third is the Hungry Choir's creation related to the death of Yolda? Those
Yes.
timelines kind of line up. Is there more to it there?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of touched on this in the last episode. Actually, I was very proud of making that connection, and then read this chapter, and I was like, okay, no. By the time this episode came out, everyone had already just seen the story explicitly draw it. Um,
Isn't that always the way?
but I'm pretty convinced there's something like at this point, especially now that the story's kind of directly brought it up. I would be surprised to learn that the Hungry Choir isn't of Yolda to some significant degree.
Yeah.
Like at this point, I've just kind of accepted it as truth, and now I'm here. Like, so why? Like that's the question I keep coming back to: is what was the point of doing this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. So the other thing that kind of comes up, although it's not as firmly discussed, is the idea of where does uh, Kennet, where do the Kennet others, the Council of Kennet, where did that
Mm,
start? That's something that they're trying to think about more because it seems like it is, becoming more and more important.
yes.
I'm glad they're thinking about it because it is going to be important, right?
Yeah, and speaking of things I think we've talked about the last few episodes, I think that was something where we kept being like, please go into the history of this town more. That there's something there. Um, yeah, I mean we get some answers to this, but like Edith and Matthew seem intentionally vague on it. Even reading this more carefully again for my second read through, I was like listening to what Matthew said about how they got into town and what it was like when they got here, and I was like, I don't understand any of what he's really saying here.
Mm, yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I
No, please.
yeah, so I don't know. I'm just like, well, I guess this ties into the whole why of the Hungry Choir. Then also has me thinking like, why was the Carmine Beast killed? Like, did it just get too close? Was she investigating the Hungry Choir or something and got too close and it killed her? Was she pointed too close? Um, yeah, I don't know. There's so much to think about there.
Mm. It's weird, isn't it? We'll touch on this when we get to the Pale Predictor as well, but I think the thing that we really don't know is what's the motive of all this, right? Because the original motive that was put forward was, someone's kind of trying to take power here. That's the motive that seemed the most obvious. But
Hmm.
we're getting to the point where that just doesn't seem likely, right? Like it just seems so not the motive that
Well, what are they waiting for?
yeah,
If that is
exactly. Like it's been what, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, right? What's why? Yeah, why? Why did like and we're talking about Charles and the Carmine Beast and the Hungry Choir and stuff, and like that's all well and good. That's a mystery in and of itself, but what does that have to do with the Carmine Beast, right? Like, what? Why is that relevant? That's the thing. That's the missing piece, right? Because even if it is, you know, Yolda was converted into the Carmine Beast, and they use Charles's knowledge of how to make others to do it or whatever, right? Which is kind of the leading kind of theory now. What does that imply for the Carmine Beast? Why is it just two completely unrelated things? That can't be right, right? Like that's just too narratively nonsensical.
Yeah, well, and so I guess the other thing here is if the Hungry Choir is something where a few people in town kind of own it and presumably are getting power from it,
Yes.
wait, there's good odds that that is the case. Why would they also want or need the Carmine Beast as a power source? Or
Yeah.
is it like an internal fight in Canada? Like, do
Yeah.
Charles and Matthew have control of the Hungry Choir, and then fucking John was like, "Well, I don't have any of that," so he went and killed the Carmine Beast, and now it's like two of the
I
biggest power
see.
sources in all of Canada. It's just like being like this small town squabble has just blown
Has just
way out of
taken these two
proportion.
big power sources. Yeah, maybe. Or the other potential interpretation is the Carmine Beast, in its role as some kind of judicial force, was, you know, found this out, or it was making some kind of punitive measure
Mm,
play and then had to go. I don't know. None of those feel
yeah.
right, though, right? Like,
Well, I guess the other thing I thought about is okay, if we're assuming Charles is involved, and like obviously the thing about Charles is he must have an accomplice because he can't practice
yes,
since
he's
he's
obviously
Forsworn.
can't. Yeah.
So like it can't be him by himself. But
Yeah.
if he was responsible for doing something like creating the Hungry Choir, like what that's saying to me is he has the ability to like alter others like this, like sort of reshape them. And obviously, like we know that Carmine Beast wasn't everyone's favorite person,
Mm,
particularly Charles. Like I wonder if he and his accomplice, because the thing like we keep hearing is like the Carmine Beast hasn't died and its energy is all still here.
yeah.
What if like it's just taking a while for Charles to cook it into a form that's more what he wants?
Yeah, maybe next week there'll be a new other in town called, Carmine Betty or whatever. And Charles will be like, hey,
Yeah.
I met this cool new other. Don't ask where they came from.
Well, I'm just
um,
like if he just like rearranges the Carmine Beast energy into a form that he wants, and it's like it takes its old spot, but it has different priorities. In particular, I think like Charles tried to appeal to the Carmine Beast and it wouldn't hear from him,
mm,
to kind of unforswear. Maybe Charles is turning it into someone who would, or not
yeah,
him having someone else turn it, especially because and like this is why I feel like all this stuff is coming up in terms of Edith and Matthew, just because again,
yes.
I still like we still kind of get those creepy vibes of them about the way Edith was shaped, but we'll,
Well,
we'll
we'll
get
talk
to that.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing to think of is, from what we know about Yalda at this point, she is some kind of dog, which
Hmm.
is a type of beast, and also sang, which has something to do with Hungry Quiet. So potentially, Yalda was dismantled into two entities, one of which is the Carmine Beast, one of which is the Hungry Choir, and then that's something. Although the Carmine Beast is much older than that, right? So that doesn't quite track.
I was going to say, like, I feel like it would have come up if the Carmine Beast was only
Was
9 years
also
old as
9
well.
years old. It would be too suspicious. Yeah,
Yeah. Also, wouldn't it have, like, didn't they say John would become the Carmine dog? Like, wouldn't Yolda also become?
a Carmine dog.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, you're right.
I don't know.
I don't know,
Yeah,
man. I don't know. It's like,
but
okay,
it
this
feels
is,
like we're reaching that point in the story where like we're kind of getting enough pieces that I feel like any second now we're gonna get
yeah,
something that just like
it
clicks it
clicks it all
all
into
into
place.
place.
I mean, I had this exact same experience, just to do a little plug, for a game called Outer Wilds that we are playing on the Game Club currently, where you get to a
Yes,
point where you
I
have
was
all the
thinking the same
pieces, you have all
thing.
the puzzle pieces, and you just need to put them together. And you know that they're all kind of, you know, the rough shape of each puzzle piece, but you just don't quite get how they click in yet. That feels like where we're at right now, right?
Yes. What we
Anyway,
don't have at this point is like a rumor board
yes,
with
God, we need
things that
the rumor
matter
mode so we can take a
knit
look at the
close to each
rumors.
other.
Yeah, see which planet we
Yeah.
need to go visit.
That's our request for the next extra material.
is the Outer Worlds themed rumor board for Bale. If you want to know what we're talking about, tune into the Game Club tomorrow. More on that later. Anyway, so theories aside, the trio heads off to chat to Matthew and Edith to finally get around to these final interviews. Well, theoretically final. They also haven't interviewed Louise.
Yeah, I know. It's like at this point, I'm wondering if we'll even get to Louise. I think it would be funny if
Louise
they
is going to
don't.
be the villain of the whole piece. That's the only thing that makes sense at this point.
I could just see it like arc 3 so far has a little bit been defined by them like finishing off these interviews here after the whole Avery and Miss thing happened, and I'm just kind of like, it would be funny if they're like, okay, we're going to go interview Louise and finish these off, and like on their way there, the shit just hits the fan and it doesn't actually happen.
Yeah. I mean,
But
what dope clues is Louise going to drop, though, right? Like, the fact that she's been left to last, there's got to be something in there. And if there is something in there, we presumably know it too, right?
That's what I was about to say. Like, the funny thing about Louise being saved for last is I'm kind of like, but what information?
We know it.
We
Yeah,
saw
exactly.
it from her perspective. We know more than she does at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did we miss?
What's the puzzle piece in there that is important? Maybe we should go back and reread it. I feel like there's got to be something in there. Anyway.
It'll be one of those things where, again, we're outclassed. Like, a couple of 13-year-old girls are going to figure it out. In the interview, they'll interview Louise and they'll pick it apart, and then we'll just be sitting here like, oh, obviously.
Yeah.
So to go back to Matthew and Edith, I think it's really interesting how Matthew brings up like hallows and keeps framing Kennett in that regard, because we just sort of learnt about those in Nicolette's interlude and saw how important they are. And if we're taking the lens at the moment of like Miss as the gardener who was shaping Kennett in whatever way she was, it's just so interesting, this idea of how in this ecosystem as well, when you have a garden that's sort of a safe place for others, it tends to attract them. And maybe this is coming back to the theories on like why, like if Kennett was becoming a bigger and better hallow of safety from practitioners, then like presumably it keeps growing and more others would keep coming. Like I wonder if it was a sort of place like maybe they couldn't escape, and it's kind of silly for these others who keep talking about how, we think generations ahead. Like Kennett wasn't going to be able to hide forever. Eventually it had to die. So what if that's something to do with it? Like if this place is a hallow that was going to keep attracting others who wanted to escape practitioners, it would continue to grow and it would become more and more noticeable, and eventually something was going to have to break. And I wonder if this is like, what if they knew that and this is their attempt to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. This is the first half of Matthew's interview, right?
Yeah,
and we'll talk about the second half in a bit, of course. But after this first half, I really wasn't suspicious of Matthew at all. Like I feel like he's been fairly on the level. The main thing that was suspicious about him before,
on the level.
Yeah, sure. The main thing that was suspicious about him before now was the fact they hadn't interviewed him until last, honestly. And now I'm like, yeah, he's been pretty good about it. I don't know.
I don't know. There's just something I inherently think is unexplained or a bit off with him, and I don't even really know what it is. But like, maybe I'm just reading Avery's vibes from next chapter that we'll get into. But I'm always just kind of like, I don't trust him.
Yeah.
If if it's not, he's secretly Charles's buddy and they've been doing all this, like I still feel like we're going to learn something about Matthew that makes me not think as highly of him.
But
I could be wrong.
To come back to the core problem, Elliot, these creatures can't lie, right? Like, I mean, honestly, the only solution is it is a combination of, it can't just be Charles by himself, right? We kind of know that.
Yeah.
Charles by himself can't do this, but he can lie, so that's important. So maybe if there was another, I don't know, is there some other that can lie that could be a good potential partner for Charles? Who can lie in the story that we've met so far, Elliot?
Are you implying Snowdrop and Charles are in cahoots? Like,
Snowdrop, you don't
where are you
say.
going?
Interesting, interesting. So that's the answer. It's Charles and Snowdrop together teamed up and killed the Carmine Beast.
Well, and then she had Marissa glamour her
into a possum. I don't know. Or like, Marissa set up, and Marissa's probably in on it as well, set up Verona to find Snowdrop and be like, oh, there's just this random possum that you found. But actually, it's not. It was actually Snowdrop the entire time.
I think there's, like, I take all sorts of odds on whether or not Marissa is involved in whatever bullshit's going on with the Hungry Choir and the Carmine Beast and how related they are. She may be involved, she may not be. She's almost certainly aware of it though. Like
Yes.
I feel like we're gonna find it. It's like even if she's not directly involved, it's gonna kind of be like, she was stoking the flames at the very least.
I think probably Guillaume as well, to be honest. I think there's no way that they are not in some way, I don't know, in some way knowledgeable. Honestly, the same for Miss. But that thread is obviously cut now.
I think it's very intentional that this is the point in the story where Miss just up and disappeared. Because it's kind of like, as we start to put these particular pieces together, you're right. There's no way that she wasn't involved or aware of what was happening here.
Here's the other thing. Sorry, finish your thought.
No, you're right.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, which is kind of a total tangent, but I think is worth discussing, maybe not a total, is the fact that in, your Agatha Christie's, this is roughly the point of the story where the second murder happens, right? Like,
oh yeah,
there's only been one murder, I think, or there's only been one murder. Sure, have there been other crimes, right? That this group is behind. So, or maybe this is the second murder. Maybe the first murder was Yolder. Second murder is Hungry Choir. Oh, sorry, Carmine Beast. Third murder is Miss ? Like, is there more crimes being done by the same perpetrator here? Or it could be Melissa's leg or whatever, right? The question is there more stuff being done by the same perpetrator here that we just haven't connected yet? And I can't really think of what that would be except for manipulating it so that Miss is taken out of the picture.
I'm currently thinking of Mrs. Leaving as like we talk here so much about these garden ecosystems and how those the whole thing, they don't collapse, they sort of reform, right? And something we've been getting hit with since like chapter 0 was the Carmine Beast's death has been like upsetting the natural balance. So like things were already sort of getting more topsy-turvy, and I kind of see Mrs. Leaving as just like a result of that. Like, the Carmine Beast dying made things more crazy and created these situations where Miss sort of sacrificed herself. Like I'm kind of willing to let that heroic moment Miss had live on, despite whatever involvement she may have had in things up until that point. But yeah, I don't know. You're right. Like learning about Yolder and the Hungry Choir being involved might sort of be like this isn't the first time the killer is killed, like a very Mindhunter-y, like, no, they actually are a serial killer. Or I don't know. Honestly, I could see this being the arc where, I was talking about expecting more shit to hit the fan. Maybe we will get another
murder.
Death.
Yeah.
Probably John at this point.
Nah, I don't think it would be John. Who's the most likely? I mean, maybe Alpy. That would be pretty rough, but I could see it.
But then she can't become anyone's familiar.
Yes, I know, Elliot. That's why it would be poetic, I think. Anyway, so
my thinking with John is just they've had such a good relationship with John. Initial gun to head and
the chapter we're about to have, I think, as well.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, you know what? I'll save it for there.
Yeah, cool. Let's dive into 3.5 because these two chapters feel like they are one connected entity, right?
Yeah.
So Avery goes off to spy on John in the interim between interviewing Matthew and Edith, and her goal is basically gather some info on him when he isn't aware he's being watched, and it doesn't work. it immediately fails.
Yes, although like we should also call out Avery. Like we get this bit where she's running there, and it's more of her like ability to move now. She's got like her jump rope, Pegasus boots, and her jump rope. and it's the coolest thing. Like
Yeah.
hearing about the way she's fucking zapping around
Yeah.
and stuff. Like it's like the coolest. You know, like those video games that have really satisfying movement. And you enter this like great flow.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
what it sounds like to me. Like for some reason, I keep thinking specifically the game Infamous when
Mm.
doing Avery stuff because that game had like some teleporting stuff you could do to sort of zip around the battlefield and stuff. And then like I feel like that's what she's doing here, and I'm so jealous.
Yeah. I mean, it would be pretty fun to have a jump rope, right?
Hmm.
I want one. What is there a canonical name for it currently? I feel like jump rope's pretty good. Skipping rope's okay. Maybe escape rope is also not bad.
Oh yeah, that's a good reference.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, they just sort of call it the rope. I think.
lame. I think I like jump rope. Jump rope. All right. So yeah, there's this bit where as Avery jumps to go and spy on John, we basically see the diagrams that she's got to connection block starting to burn out almost immediately.
Yeah,
And I mean, it becomes very, very clear that this is just not going to work. And I think the interesting thing that this is starting to set up is the fact that the girls aren't against the Kennet others per se, at least not yet. But it does feel like they're not as able to just kind of take them as resources anymore. Like the fact that the Kennet others are suspicious of them means that they're not by themselves and they're not against the Kennet others, but we're definitely kind of taking away the safety net that they seem like they've had so far in the story. As Miss went, so too did this place as a complete haven and a power source, right? It's still that to an extent, but
yeah.
it's not so safe for them.
Yes, and we'll get to talk a bit more about that when we have the confrontation about the leadership towards the end as
Yes.
well. But you're right. Like I couldn't help but have my biggest immediate takeaway from this segment with John here being like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Like John and the others in this town are fucking scary. When
Yeah.
you're up against them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's starting to plant that seed of you're not against them yet, but you also don't want to be.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, like John, uh, John's so scary, and Avery just sort of directly calls it out in this hilariously innocent way. But I couldn't help just be like, "Oh my god!" Like, I hope they never have to go up against John. He's
Yes.
terrifying.
Yes, he is quite scary. Avery gets scared by him and then kind of gets upset at him for scaring her. And I'm kind of like, Avery, don't pretend this isn't your fault completely. You're the one who was spying on him.
Yeah, and I mean, John doesn't really like give any ground on that
Yeah.
point, which I was like, yeah, fair. Um,
I do
but
want to call out that when Avery's spying on John, she says his name. She says, "What's going on, John?" With like talking to herself. And I feel like that's kind of when he starts to notice her. And I think the fact that she named him was enough to form enough of a connection to be like, "Hey, what's that?" kind of deal.
yeah, probably. I mean, like it's interesting how, like, I would assume that it's the sort of thing where the more attention she puts on him, like the
Yes.
more, yeah, the more it goes. And by doing
Yeah.
something like saying his name, you're right, it was like probably not good. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like for me, so the other thing apart from just reminding us how fucking terrifying John and the town is, I felt the other thing this did for me is, as I sort of said, John, aside from a rough start, has always, been pretty on the same page as the Kenneteers. Like, and Lucy sort of even goes into how she was thinking about having him as a familiar at the end of last chapter.
Mm.
Um, like they gave him a Pokemon game. Like that's a sacred bond, and even if he's not involved, and he seems so cool most of the time. I want to believe he's not involved,
Yeah.
but it's just so like this is one of those moments where it kind of feels like, well, the relationship has changed now. Like he has that natural distrust of practitioners. They have kind of tried to sneaky on him. Like I just don't know. It's gonna
Yeah.
be one of those marks on the relationship that won't go away.
Yeah. Once you've
Um,
gone behind his back once, it's enough to, you know, make him be nervous towards you.
yeah, exactly. And I just, he's not going to be the same ally he was. And, again, that's why I'm kind of like, oh, well, if he's going to be the next victim. And because that would be scary if John's another victim because he's another thing that shouldn't be killable.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like, so even if he's not, like, even if he's going to be around, it's still like, I just was like, oh, well, this is the end of John being a strong ally. Again, it comes down to this whole thing, like with the Carmine Beast around, particularly in Lucy's point of view, there's the daggers are out all over town, and it's like it's harder to maintain nice relationships, and I think we're sort of seeing that here.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Avery has this little encounter with John, but then heads back, and the trio start to interview Edith.
Yes. And so this is where I sort of want to bring up like Avery, and we saw this from Avery in the very start of the story. She has a very negative opinion of Matthew and Edith's relationship, and
Mm.
it's used to really set this kind of
Uneasy
uncomfortable
tone.
tone.
Yeah.
This interview sort of starts off, and it's like, okay, Edith is in clothes that don't look right on her, I think is sort of what Avery sort of says, and then Avery comments on how she's always sort of behind Matthew, and with that in mind, I couldn't help but notice that like the interview is meant to be of Edith, but Matthew keeps answering more questions. Like whenever they ask something, it has to they have to sort of specifically say, "Hey, Edith," or
Yeah.
Matthew will kind of
Yeah.
jump in and take it for both of them.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like the fact that these little details are brought up, it kind of prime you for feeling there's something off with these two, like as we get into the
Yeah.
interview.
What do you think about that? What do you think about? Is there merit to that? Is it just? I mean, obviously Edith is on edge after chatting to her family. Is that it, or is there more to it there?
I like we talked about this. I think it was like in our third episode, like
Yes.
when they went camping, and
Yeah.
this is when Avery brought this up last time, and I sort of said, given the way in Matthew's backstory it's been set up that he like shaped Edith,
Yeah.
there's just such a potentially icky
Yes.
like view on how she's kind of been molded by him.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines of like a love potion and how creepy that kind of
Yeah.
is when you think about it, right? Like
Yeah, like
he's
a
made
grooming.
himself the perfect woman in air quotes. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Like he sort of groomed her,
yes.
and like and the thing is, like we haven't seen evidence really for or against, or we've seen it. We haven't seen super strong evidence that sort of like confirms, like, oh yeah, he's been a massive creeper here.
Yeah.
But like,
And they do
I
seem to
doubt
have
it's
quite a loving relationship, right? Like clearly
yeah,
they do.
exactly. But I mean, that's what you have when one of you grooms the
Yes,
other one.
fair.
So like, yeah, I don't. There's like for me, there's that sort of stain on being able to view them as a good, healthy relationship because of that potential read, and like that's sort of still there for me. So I am just sort of inherently kind of like, okay, like what is going on here? Because I don't trust Matthew, and there's that whole tie, and I think people brought this up in Power Predictor. Like, we know Charles is Captain builds others and
Yeah.
potentially has helped build the Hungry Choir, and you can't help but think, well, him and Matthew are buddy buddy.
Yeah.
Like, is there something there? So, yeah, I don't know, but like, yeah, I do just I tend to think Avery's probably thinking along the right track, just because there is that read of their relationship, and it hasn't been expressly deconfirmed yet. So I'm like,
Mm,
oh, it could be,
mm.
and
Yeah.
Avery keeps bringing it up, so we're definitely meant to like think it's a
There's meant to
possibility.
be something there. Yeah. To touch on Edith a bit more, we really get a bit more of the kind of tragic mundaneness of her life here. The fact that she's kind of living a half life, right? Like she has to be Edith James sometimes, which clearly is uncomfortable at best for her and obviously quite draining. But she also kind of has to do it because it anchors her to reality, right? And if she doesn't pretend to be Edith James, she could potentially completely be lost.
Yes. It's yeah. I mean, like, it just sounds like her whole situation sucks. Like as she says, she doesn't naturally get held together, so she's constantly having to fight just for her place, and also she's having to fight for that place, which is on the like towards the bottom of the ladder. Like her
Yeah.
and you sort of go into this whole thing, which is like a fairly upfront analogy for like systemic oppression, where it's kind of like
Yes.
the world is designed to keep humans on top, and so there's this unconscious bias like everyone will sort of have when interacting with them or filing papers to do with them, where it will be more likely to go wrong or happen slower, and so it just gives them way less opportunities to be in a better place.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. It is just systemic oppression of others from positions of power, right?
Yeah, although what's interesting, like here, like it's very much framed as it's not an individual, like they won't notice they're doing it. It's just like the system is not even built. The system just is designed to do this. Like it is human centric. It's designed to do that, and it's like, it's not that paperclerk's fault. Is sort of how they frame it. It's just like the universe will just conspire to do it. And it's just like the system is broken. It's not any specific individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this part in this conversation where Verona really just puts her foot in her mouth, where she basically says, "Oh, Marissa has the moth thing, and you're a candle, right?" It's just like so blunt, and this is the start, in my mind, of Edith getting a little bit pissed off at these three.
Yeah, she's sort of like, I'm not a candle,
I'm
and
not
she
a
sort of goes into
candle, yeah. Like what?
and again, coming off the back of like this metaphor for systemic oppression, like I couldn't help but feel like this is one of those comments someone from a position of privilege just sort of says and doesn't realize like how insulting or rude it is.
How reductive it is,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, Edith just kind of challenges it directly, which is great, and then she also makes a hilarious moth pun.
Mm-hmm.
Where she says Matthew is the only moss drawn to my flame, which I was
Classic.
like, well, Edith has to be the good guy
Yeah,
because
that's
you
too
can't
good of a pun. Yeah.
you can't be working on that sort of pun level and be the bad guy. My heart will break.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope not. That'll be tragic if it is true.
Yeah.
The moss to my flame. It's classic. It's a classic comment. So yeah, also there's this bit where they talk about why they can't have kids, but obviously let's just skip over that because it is pretty horrifying. So
Scritchy,
move
scritchy.
on. Yep, great. Thanks,
Baby's
Elliot.
coming early.
So eventually in this interview, they drop the bomb asking Edith where she is. They kind of reveal, or not quite reveal, but just use the knowledge that they gained that Edith had not been at home. And she tries to slip her way out of it, but they continue to hound her.
Yeah. I mean, they keep pressing and it becomes clear what's happening. But I love how even before we really dig into this, we start to get these ideas on like how Edith's emotional state affects like her and the space around her. Like when Matthew makes some comment about thinking of her as a job, which again, what the hell are you doing, Matthew? Like she gets literally heated. And obviously that becomes a big thing like as this conversation takes the path Edith doesn't want. And it's just like I love how this world is always set up so that the environment like has a reason in story for literally reflecting like what's going on here.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? We get a lot of these beats of Avery kind of noticing the wind and stuff like that. And as Avery starts to, big herself up to get her confidence ready for this more intense, actively ruffling feathers part of the conversation, you can feel the tension build up. And then literally Edith, unintentionally, I guess, heats up the room as she gets tense and you feel it. You can feel the tension tangibly taking form in the scene as it happens. Great.
Yeah, like you could in a movie where you have this sort of thing. It's like when this tension rises, like when they start challenging her and Edith starts to get upset. You know, the movie it would change the lighting and it would make it like a bit darker or a bit redder or something, right? And what I love is in story that's kind of literally what's happening. Like because Edith is a candle spirit, it's she's able. Well, she just sort of ambiently has that effect on the space. Like it's so fun how story techniques are just woven into this world like this.
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, we get the clue, I guess, that Edith did what is the spirit equivalent of going for a walk to clear her head in a mystery like
Yeah.
this, right? And obviously that's
Well, she
something that
literally cleared her head. She hopped out of her head for a
well,
bit.
yes, true. And that's obviously big news that she didn't have an alibi. I mean, she can't lie, and she said she had no involvement with the Carmine Beast, but potential avenues include one, her body being unattended and someone else could have potentially used it somehow. And two, she could have done anything in that time, seemingly not specifically killed or harmed the Carmine Beast, but she didn't answer what she did during that time or if she met anybody else. She just kind of said, I just went to the spirit world, who knows what
Yeah.
that means.
Well, and then she kind of excuses herself from the table. She's like, "I'm
Yes.
not doing this," and there's the whole thing with her family. So you're kind of like, okay, like I get that this actually wasn't the time to do this. It seems like a pretty good excuse. So we'll try again tomorrow morning. Um, yeah, I don't know, but I also love the bit where Avery's getting ready because Avery sort of takes the lead here, which isn't normally something we see her do. Uh,
Mm.
and she has this great moment where she starts to hesitate, and then she sort of gets comfort just from like looking at and sort of making eye contact with Lucy and Verona, and it's just
Mm.
a really good like again just highlighting how good these three are for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, they do well, don't they? This scene has a lot of those kinds of interactions that are really nice. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so we get to the point where Edith has kind of stormed out a bit and obviously left some very lingering pauses, right? Um, and the group kind of continues to chat to Matthew a bit more before he asks them to leave, and they finally ask about the leadership.
yes. And I mean it's funny. Like Matthew, sort of like earlier in this conversation, he was like, "Oh, we have five of us doing what Miss used to do, and we're not doing as good a job as she did by herself." And then when these three sort of are like, "Hey, what's happening in Otherland?" He's like, "It's none of your business. Get out of our grill." And it's like, "Oh yeah, cool. Like creating a fissure here. That sure seems like the way to go, Matthew." Like
Mm.
I get it, but I was just like, "Oh, this is I don't think this is the right way to do this."
Yeah, I don't know. I think specifically not bringing up the leadership was wrong because it is, I mean, it's what John said when they chatted to Avery. Like, sorry, when John and Avery had that encounter where Avery was like, "Oh, we were just checking up on you. It doesn't mean anything," and John was like, "Well, you ran away." Like,
Yeah,
that's the real problem. The fact that you ran away implies you know something was wrong about what you were doing. And
exactly.
similarly, Matthew hid this leadership thing, right? Like, he said, "Oh, I just didn't think it was relevant," but that's obviously nonsense, right? I also would be fine if it was like I wouldn't see it as an issue, except for the fact that he explicitly didn't bring it up, right?
Yeah, yeah, I tend to agree, and I think he has some sort of excuse, doesn't he? Of like, oh, you could use that to bind us and take everyone else in the town under, and it's kind of like, look, these three are now the practitioners of Kennet as far as the outside world is concerned. That's public knowledge now. You're gonna have to work with them. Like you
Mm,
can't hide who's in charge. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I get why he's done it, but I'm just like Matthew. I don't think you're doing this the right way. And there's all this stuff like, oh, we have to think 5 generations ahead. So yeah, yeah. Again, I get it, but I'm just like, oh, I don't think this is the right way to do it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do feel that he's quite fair in this conversation. I do think he's been incorrect about not telling them, but in general, his responses are hard to argue with logically, right? Like he they just can't trust them as much right now because they've been pushed so much closer to the edge of things going catastrophically, and it just they need to be more careful. Like fair
Yeah.
enough, you know?
And as Verona brings up, like they now have, the Kenneteers now have like access to other practitioners and a plan to
Yes.
go and be with them for
Yeah.
like a couple of months. Like I think, like an unimportant factor, like we can't skip over. If they're going to go there for summer school, like what are they going to be there for? 1, 2 months?
Mm.
That's longer than they'll have been the practitioners of Kennet. Like I think it's fair to sort of be like, well, okay, 2 months over there, you're going to have spent more time with the practitioners than you have with us.
Yeah.
Pretty valid reason to be concerned, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Um, yeah. I do well, okay, first before we get to that, I think the one other thing to worth touching on here is they do ask Matthew about the Hungry Choir and about what he would think about them teaming up to take it down. And he's receptive. He's well, kind of. He doesn't make any firm commitments, but he does seem to say, "Yeah, I'm like on board in principle. It's just going to be really messy to try and actually help you." Um, so I don't know what to make of that as well. It doesn't feel like he's involved with its creation, at least.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting with all this stuff. And again, like I think the thing you got to keep in mind with this story is we've seen so many people show the ability to forget things that like, and in a story with consequences, like I'm thinking on Dollhouse now with this whole idea of, oh, if you just forget what you did, then there's no consequences, and that was basically a TV show saying, nah, there still is though.
Mm.
So like, are we going to find out that some of the people in town like were involved in making the Hungry Choir, and then they felt bad, so they had their memories wiped? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
I mean, the
we'll
thing
have
here
to
is
see, I suppose.
the Cannoteers frame this as like, oh, if we have a plan, will you back us? And I felt like they gave the impression they did have a plan, which
Yeah,
do
they
they?
don't, right?
Not
Yeah,
as far as I know.
yeah. I mean, they just don't, right? Like, what was it that Avery said, or Lucy, I can't remember who it was, said, "Hey, what if we had a way to take them out permanently?" And I was like, "Do you?" I
Yeah,
don't think you do.
exactly. It's news to me.
Yeah. Anyway, so the last thing to touch on here is, again, I was obviously upset when Miss vanished from the story. That's sad, but
Yeah.
I'm really liking the vibe that it has now, right? It really feels more dangerous to just exist in the world now. Like, the safety net is gone, and I do love the vibe that's added to the story.
Yeah, like as a like reader who enjoys the story in the abstract, like it was totally a great choice because it is just like upended the status quo, essentially. Like it's a great
Yeah.
story device. It's sort of the same thing where like the Elliot who tries to treat the people in the story as real and cares about the characters, when he like hears about the fairy, he's like, "Oh God, no, this is awful." Whereas like the Elliot who's enjoying this as a story is like, "Fuck yeah, let's get the fairy involved, like make this shit go wild." It's sort of the same thing. Like I'm sad that Miss is gone, but also there's that part of me that's just like, "Oh, this is fun." Like everything is gone to shit now.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fun, but also nerve-wracking, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and again, for me, it keeps coming back to this idea. Like people have sort of kept saying, "Oh, the longer the Carbine Beast's role isn't kept, like the more things are going to get off kilter," and it really, it like that seems to be a prophecy that's coming true. The daggers are coming out.
Yeah.
Um, but to be fair, this chapter does end with Avery going home and having like this really nice moment with Snowdrop, where they just sort of hug and chat about the day. Um, I don't know, Snowdrop feels so good for Avery. Like Avery sort of talks about how she doesn't want to go in and see her family. She just wants to hang out with Snowdrop and feed her milk. Um, I'm so terrified that something's going to happen to Snowdrop.
Well, she's going to be the villain. We already discussed it.
Yeah,
Her
oh
and
yeah,
Charles,
good point. I forgot.
the villains of the show. Yeah. No, me too. I really do. Snowdrop is just such a delight, right? And we're getting to the point of the story where Snowdrop doesn't seem to be taking a front seat. She's just kind of background to Avery now, and I love it. She's just so great.
Yes, she's wearing another. I can't even remember what it is. This wasn't it was aesthetically. She's got like another shirt, and it has another hilarious slogan on it.
Mm.
Aesthetically, so anyway, the point is
I've forgotten to.
when do we get access to the Snowdrop fashion line? Like when can I buy these shirts? I want
Well,
an extra material one week that's just
yeah.
the designs of all the Snowdrop shirts and links to buy them on Redbubble.
Do you think that's why Walbo's done pale, is to promote his new fashion line?
I hope so.
The Snowdrop tea line? Yeah, because I mean, I think it would sell pretty well.
I'd wear them, and then because it's one of those things where people would be like, "Elliot, why are you as an adult male wearing like aesthetically trash on your t-shirt?" And I'd be like, "Well," and I'll hand out business cards that just have a link to the Pale website. So
And fan art of Snowdrop on them.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of 3.5. It feels like we're getting to the point of the story where things are starting to collide, threads are starting to tie together. We'll have to
yeah.
see,
Well,
I
it,
suppose.
it it does feel like we're entering the sort of next phase of the story, like with
Yes.
with the Forest Ribbon Trail ending and like Miss leaving and the Belanger stuff kind of hitting this stalemate.
Mm.
These last couple of chapters have sort of felt like, okay, we've sort of had all our immediate problems take a bit of a back seat, and we're kind of recalibrating and bringing stuff together, introducing new mysteries, and we're going to push forward into like the next phase of this story.
You know what the real problem is, Elliot, is We still haven't learned what miss is short for. Is it short for mystery? Is it short for missing? It's got to be something, right? But what? But what? And when we find out, it's going to unravel all the clues. I'm so sure
Yeah,
about
that'll be the important piece for sure.
it. Missing seems quite likely at this point because we know she was lost.
Yeah, I think that's the pun she was going for.
Mm, Anyway, um, I mean, it's fair to say we miss her, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's why she's called that. It's another level
So
higher.
moving on to the 3.5 extra material, which was gifts received.
Yes. So this is basically a big list of all the gifts that they've got, and it's good. It's nice. It's a good little summary. It doesn't feel like it's got any clues hidden in it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, like it kind of overlaps in some ways, obviously, with like the Verona email one that we had, which I think was also just called gifts received. Um, I quite liked this one though, as its ability to just act like a checklist. Like the verbosity of the Verona email one
Mm,
was great and gave me tons of new information. But by the
mm,
time I got to the bottom of it, I kind of was like, wait, so what are all the gifts again? Whereas
yeah.
this is just like, this is going to be super handy to just sort of go back to and just sort of remember all the stuff they have had or do have
Mm,
in a very quick and easy format to go like, yes, 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 no, they've done X, Y, Z,
mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
No,
this is
it's
one
good.
I think I see myself coming back to a lot more than the emails ones because
Just
it's
because
just
it's in nicer format for you, I guess.
yeah, it is a nice little checklist. Like that's how it's formatted, and I think that there's benefit in having it framed that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Yes. So, uh, do you have anything else you want to say about it? I don't know. It feels like we've touched on it for a very short amount of time, but I don't think there's that much to talk about for it.
No. Like again, I feel like it's one I'm going to come back to more than I'm going to like use it right now.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Um,
the art was very good in it. There's lots of like
yes, true.
neat little
Little
drawings
Verona
associated with all the things.
thing.
We
Yeah.
get like I think what might be our biggest profile of what I assume is Verona down the bottom.
Mm, yes, I think it is. It's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's definitely not
I
well no,
think it's
actually it has to be
Verona.
Verona.
Yeah,
It can't be Avery and it can't
and
be
it can't be
Lucy.
Lucy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Um, all right. So moving on, let's talk about some predictions from Pale Predictor.
Yes. So what have you got for us, Rube?
I brought a prediction from Sarah Penguin, and this is kind of what I touched on before. The idea that we don't have a good motive for what's been going on with the Carmine Beast, right?
Sure.
I actually can't think of a motive for anything that's happened except for it's something to do with the Hungry Choir stuff, right? Which feels a little shallow right now. Like we don't have enough on that to see why that would tie in. So
Yeah.
I brought a prediction from Sarah Penguin, who's talking about a whodunit, and Sarah thinks that it was basically that it's a power play. Somebody is doing this as a way of distracting Alexander Belanger with something
Mm.
interesting enough to draw his attention so that they can do something else, draw in Nicolette potentially or make a power play for the school, something along those lines. So theoretically, maybe Chase is behind it all, or the one who went to Skype his girlfriend is actually the villain of the whole piece. Who knows?
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean it's definitely because you're right. Like I don't yet have a grasp on how I think the Bellingers will fit into the grand scheme of things.
Mm,
Like, I obviously sort of posited this idea earlier that I'm kind of sticking with now that like Charles is maybe now that he has it, is wanting to alter the Carmine Beast. Just because I think that would interestingly fit into the ideas of like justice and consequences that we're talking about. Having
yes.
him kind of vigilante a new judicial system into the area.
Yeah, I can see that one.
But like that doesn't account for all the stuff going on outside of Kennet, which feels a little flat. So like there's probably more to it than that.
Mm,
And like Sarah's got some interesting ideas in that direction, I think.
yeah, definitely. Um, cool. Do you have a prediction that you wanted to highlight for us?
Yes. So I pulled out a prediction by Propaganda Pagoda.
Okay, great. I love
Um,
that name. It's a great name.
it's a very good one. And so basically this was just a bit of a miscellaneous one. Pagoda's talking about how like Verona keeps using this connection breaking stuff. We've seen so much of it. She uses a bit of it in the classroom in chapter 3.4, I think. Um, Basically, Pagoda thinks, well, Verona using all this connection breaking stuff and kind of abusing the universe's conspiracy to keep the trio together because they awoke together is going to continue to affect her relationship with her dad. And like, we're maybe already seeing some rebound, but if she keeps pushing it, there'll be like this colossal shift. And like Pagoda's idea is the world will like assume a new normal where Verona just is free of her dad. But it'll be some sort of like monkey's paw.
Yeah.
They specifically use the term Tobias ? Which I think is a reference that I don't understand.
I think it's a reference to Animorphs. I think they're saying she's going to get stuck in an animal form, basically.
Ah, okay.
There's been a lot of references. We made too many references to getting stuck as an animal, which is Tobiasing, obviously, in Animorphs. And
I
now
do remember you saying that. Yeah,
the shorthand for it.
Sorry, I only saw a handful of episodes of that show growing up.
It was books, Elliot. What are you even talking about? Was there a show?
Okay, I'm only familiar with the show.
Okay, well, never mind.
Anyway, yes. Sorry. So back to Pagoda's stuff. So basically, yeah, this idea that Verona is going to continue sort of kicking the real, like you're dealing with real life stuff down the road, and it's like going to explode, and she's going to realize that that's not actually what she wants, but it will be too late. And her response to that will probably be to continue throwing herself into other things like summer school. So that's sort of what Pagoda was about. I just thought this was a really interesting one to kind of. There's stuff been going on with Verona and her dad, and that happened 4 chapters ago now, and we've just had Avery and Lucy chapters since then. We've had 2 from each of them. So this Verona's dad stuff has kind of been cooking. And we're not seeing where it's going. We're just getting little glimpses. And I like how Propaganda Pagoda's trying to think on it and, think about where it might be going even longer term.
Yeah, I like that. Who knows? I mean, obviously, Verona and her dad has been this consistent terror every single Verona chapter. And, when we get a 3-chapter break from Verona, as we sometimes do, it's easy to let that slip into the background of your mind, but it is an eternal problem that is consistently getting worse, right? So, yeah. I don't know. There's going to be some blow up of it, and it's going to come before the end of before the start of the summer school, right? Because that's when she's got mum stuff to figure out. So it's going to be at least either then or before then. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be so interesting when her mum comes into it. And then there's the summer school too, because like either way, because there's 2 reactions her mum can have, right? Her mum can either be like, "Oh, that's great, I don't have to have you," which is its own sort of awful.
Yeah, wow.
Or her mum's going to be like, "No, this is my summer with you. Your dad's done this." I feel like would be the other response, and then it's just going to get like just what Verona's family needs is more conflict, and that's what Kenneth is just going to do to places at the moment. So. Yeah.
Yep.
I can't wait. I'm curious, like, how summer school will be handled from the story, just like from the perspective of it's been like 3 arcs and we've covered like 2-ish weeks. Like, are we going to have some sort of like time skip?
I think the story's going to end before we get there, honestly. I think the story's going to end and we're going to get an epilogue or 2 that's like, hey, and here's how that shakes out.
Yeah, I could see that.
Is my gut feeling, but I don't fucking know. I'm not wild.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. That's I guess that's the end of our show, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, folks. If you have thoughts on these 2 chapters that we've discussed, or the predictions, or just anything in general, the episode in general, feel free to leave it in the discussion thread, which will be linked down in the show notes down below.
Yes, and don't forget, as we mentioned at the start of the episode, we're running that fan art contest.
Mm-hmm.
You send your fan art to fanart@doofmedia.com.
Do it.
And then it will be our patrons who actually vote on that at the end. So anyone can submit art, but it's our patrons who vote for the winner, who wins the cash prize of $100 US dues.
Whoa, US dues. That's even better.
There's also, I think, $25 prizes for the runner-up.
Yeah. So it's all kinds of cool stuff. If you want more information on that, head to doofmedia.com, where you can find all the other great shows on the Doof Media Network.
Yes, one of those coming up 12-ish hours after this episode comes out,
Mm-hmm.
is the game club that we referenced earlier, where Ruben and I will be talking about Outer Wilds.
Yes, if you like trippy, mind-bending, weird shenanigans, and I think you do if you're listening to this, then check it out. It's a good game, and it'll be a great show, I am sure. I mean, we haven't recorded it
Yeah.
yet, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Yeah, I don't
This,
know.
I think, is the one I'm the most excited to dive into.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, like there's going to be a lot to say on this. It's a fascinating game.
Yeah. If you want even more discussion on the Game Club game, one of the places that there is more discussion on each of these games every month is the Doof Media Patreon. So if you want to, the Doof Media Discord, which you get access to if you're a patron. So if you want that, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and check out all the cool rewards tiers.
Yes, the Game Club channel in our Discord has been an absolute delight this month.
It really has.
Particularly since it launched most months, I think our Game Club channel has been an absolute highlight of the month.
Yeah.
So please come join us if you can.
Yeah. While you're
don't forget.
Oh no, please. I mean, I have one. I have a good one. If you.
Okay, no, go for it, please.
Well, I've kind of got. It's not fully formed. I'll workshop it, and you tell me what you think.
Okay. I'm nervous. I'm not gonna lie.
And if you want to support Wildbow and hopefully incentivize him to produce his own range of Snowdrop related merch, why don't you head on over to patreon.com/Wildbow and support him? Does that work? Is that something?
Yeah, no, I'm behind that. Don't pressure him into it. But,
yeah, totally.
Just make it clear that the demand is out there.
Don't do that. Don't be a nuisance.
No, yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe
we may not get it, but it exists in our hearts.
Yeah. The only way is to try.
Yeah, and so on that note, we'll be back next week for what I assume is 2 more chapters of Arc 3.
Yeah.
I have no idea where we go.
I know. It's just going to be something horrible. It feels like the story is getting to a point where it needs another inciting incident to really kick it into high gear, and it's just going to be another murder. Like, Alpi's going to get murdered. I'm so sure of it.
It's been 3 chapters since, something terrible and fast-paced happened.
Yeah. We're overdue for another horror.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we're going to start doing something next chapter, and then, John's going to get murdered.
It's going to be Edith or Matthew, I think.
Oh, that'd be right. All Louise.
Well, I think either Edith or Matthew, possibly Matthew, because it will send the other one of them really over the edge, and it will just be such a mess, right?
That's true. That's true.
Anyway,
well, we shall see.
Stay tuned. That's the end of our show. See you, folks.
See ya.